all know how awesome they are. However, there are also some games out there that I just shrug off. A lot of you may have seen me rant about games that I don't like, and now it's time for me to rant on my 10 least favorite of them. Of course, you're allowed to disagree with my opinion, even if you happen to like the number 1 entry on the list. But I'd better warn you that I might state my opinion and make it sound like a fact, even though that isn't my intention. So let's get this list started.
I can hurry and save Elise.
Face it, a lot of you knew that Skyward Sword would show up on the list. The only surprise is that it's only number 10. That's because while I hate the game, I realize there are at least some good things about it. It has great boss battles as well as amazing music, and it can be very emotional when it wants to. Not to mention how genius the level design is. I mean, a time shift orb that lets you send part of the level many years into the past? That's a genius idea! I'm still not a fan of the game, but it's a relatively decent game on a technical standpoint. But of course, as a lot of you know, I still don't like the game. Now that I've seen more reviews of it, I can safely say, now I have better reasons to hating it. Some games have their own ways of riding something to travel around. Whether it be a pana, a boat, or a train, this game has you fly around on a loft wing. The problem? It doesn't feel as awesome as it should, since the music and scenery are so cliched. And the sky overworld is so empty. I know what you're thinking. Wind Waker had an empty overworld too. Well, at least there were actually more stuff to explore. Not to mention the atmosphere and scenery weren't so cliched. You know about the awesome exploration the series is known for? That exploration is pretty much gone. Seriously, that was half the fun of playing Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. And the new one-dimensional races introduced have little to no personality and or involvement in the game. I mean, the greatly developed races made for awesome subplots in the other Zelda games, but here they're completely bland and easily forgotten. And of course, Fi, without a doubt the worst sidekick in Zelda history for being the wife of Captain Obvious. Also, I can understand that it was supposed to be the 25th anniversary of the Zelda series. It came out 9 months late. Zelda first started in February, not in November. Overall, while I don't hate this game as much as I used to, I would much rather play Twilight Princess. I have much higher expectations for the next installment, A Link Between Worlds. I bet I'll enjoy it much more. Quarter Guy, I'm really sorry you're about to hear this, but I think I might be losing interest in the Mega Man series. Why? Because of Mega Man 3. When playing through this game, I couldn't help but feel like I was playing a rehash of Mega Man 1 and 2 with different levels, with little to no innovation. Oh, but it has new music! Yeah, very unmemorable music. It introduced Rush. So, to me, that felt like nothing but a gimmick, and you could have easily pulled off all his moves with the platform weapons in Mega Man 2. But it lets you face all the past Robot Masters. Correction. It forced you to face the past Robot Masters in extensions of 4 of the past levels, which was nothing but filler. They made the levels twice as long, twice as frustrating, twice as boring, and with only 1 checkpoint in them. It introduced a slide ability. Okay, I'll give it that, but even still, I wasn't too impressed by the rest of the game. And there are some pretty memorable Robot Masters like Snake Man, Gemini Man, and Hard Man.
That's disgusting!
To me, this game was unmemorable, bland, and barely did anything to innovate, giving this game the number 9 entry on the list.
Wow, Jack! Press X button to perform a homing attack.
Finding Nemo, one of the best received movies ever and definitely one of Pixar's finest works. Unlike the Game Boy Advance game, now I know what you're thinking, it's a license-based game. License-based games are almost always bad. Well, back when we were kids, we didn't really know license-based games were bad. Well, at least I didn't. Especially since the ones I played ranged from either just plain okay to downright awesome. This game is the only bad licensed game I've played. The graphics are blurry, the backgrounds have no detail whatsoever, and one thing that really makes me mad is that even though video games should have been able to save up by now, this game uses the password system. Why? It's understandable that back then it was used because that was in the NES genre, and they didn't have that much saving back then, but here I have to write down a password every time I want to load up my save file, only to worry about losing it, And even with my iPhone Notepad app, it gets very redundant. Combine that with terrible music, and now I feel the same way about this game as many people feel about licensed games. Great movie, terrible game. I love racing games. As long as they're not as bad as Diddy Kong Racing DS, racing games are fine. Diddy Kong Racing DS is so boring. The music is really bad and the voices are so annoying. And why do we need to put in rapid input sequences to start the vehicle? Rubbing your stylus repeatedly, constantly drawing circles, and blowing so hard into the mic that your lungs might as well turn inside out. And to make matters worse, if you get blown off the track, you have to do the rapid input sequence again. Why? I've heard people say the N64 version is much better than this version. I haven't even played the N64 version, and I already think I agree with them. You know what? All of a sudden, Diddy Kong Racing DS doesn't seem like the worst racing game I've played. Maximum Velocity is in my mind the worst racing game I've played. The music makes Diddy Kong Racing DS's soundtrack sound beautiful, and the turning controls are so stiff and unresponsive. Combine that with very sharp turns and you're going to crash into walls a lot, making the new ranking out system really aggravating. Yes, they made it so that if you're in a bad enough rank when you are on a certain lap, you get ranked out, which is kind of challenging, but it doesn't work with the stiff controls and sharp turns. I can understand it doesn't live up to its name Maximum Velocity because the game isn't as fast as F-Zero X, but the title is still very misleading. A lot of people told me Castlevania is a game I should really check out. When I first played it, I started the first level and it was pretty simple. When I got to the second level, it was a bit harder than your average game, but not too bad. Then, when I got to level 3, the game's difficulty skyrocketed. It quickly became the most frustrating game I've ever played considering all the cheap deaths, and the only healing items are hidden in walls instead of enemies. I also hate how Simon is one of the slowest gaming protagonists ever, and there's no save feature. It at least lets you restart from the beginning of the level if you get game over, but it still pretty much forces you to keep playing if you want to beat the game. I wanted to give up because of how frustrating it was, but I stopped myself from giving up because I knew that if I took a break from it and then came back, I'd have to start the whole game all over again. But then I eventually gave in after too many cheap deaths and couldn't force myself to play it any longer. Now back then, I embarrassingly didn't know that the hearts were supposed to help you use those special moves, so I played through the game again eventually. It was even worse than I remembered. And just listening to the music smacks me in the face with all the terrible memories. I thought Castlevania 3 was much better. I know what you're thinking. Castlevania 3 is much more frustrating than the original. But let me say this. I personally found the original harder because at least the third one lets you switch characters at some parts, each with their own advantages, and you may be stuck with the password saving, but I'd rather that than to not save at all. The Sonic series have had some very popular games and some not so popular ones. I've only played 3 games in the series that I didn't like. Sonic Genesis was a terrible remake of the original, for reasons that a lot of you probably know why. But it's not bad enough. And while I did not like Sonic Chaos, in my mind the worst Sonic game I've played is 3D Blast. This game is notoriously regarded as one of the worst Sonic games ever, and it's no wonder why. Sonic runs so slow in this game compared to how he is in most games, and the level design is some of the worst in gaming history. Everything looks exactly the same, and because of that, you'll keep going around in circles repeatedly to the point of frustration, and it makes the levels take a half hour to beat as opposed to a few minutes like most Sonic games. And because of the limited camera angle, it's hard to tell if some platforms are right in front of you or high above your head, causing you to fall off a bunch of times and have to climb up again and again. I know a similar thing happened in Super Mario 3D Land, but at least that was intended, optional, and didn't take nearly as long to climb. This game tried to be an early start to the 3D genre and failed at it. Super Mario RPG's overworld did the job much better. It's a good thing 2 years later we got Sonic Adventure, which was actually a good game.
Darn! We're not gonna make it! Let's speed up!
Oh no, it's Kingdom Hearts Recoded! I ranted on this game before, and that rant wasn't too impressive. Well, now you're about to hear my new improved rant on the game. I'll admit the data worlds were kind of nice, and the bug blocks were a cool addition to the game. And I know I complained about the danger blocks and steel blocks, but I forgot to mention that they weren't my problem. It was the black spider versions of them that I have a problem with. When playing this game, I couldn't help but feel like I was playing a bad remake of the original Kingdom Hearts. Now, some thought I didn't elaborate enough on why I felt that way. So, I'll explain why. You start in the Awakening, just like in the original, then you go to Destiny Islands and defeat Darkseid at the end, just like in the original, then go to Traverse Town, which is the same as it was in the original, and you even fight Guard Armor, the exact same boss. Wonderland, at least, is somewhat different because it has that little quiz, and Olympus Coliseum is admittedly different with the fact that you have turn-based battles like a normal RPG game, but Hollow Bastion has almost the exact same walkthrough as the original, and the game introduces only 3 new songs. Yes, 358 over 2 days introduced barely any music, but at least it introduced 5 new songs instead of 3. Overall, this game was just plain stupid. Game & Watch Gallery 4, a genius concept of the game. A collection of 20 different classic Game & Watch games. Nothing could ruin this experience. Except for how outdated they all are. Seriously, this game wasted months of my childhood that I'll never get back. These games are so outdated with the fact you can only stand in a few places. And some of the games seem to be just the same game as Fire with slightly different game mechanics and different scenario. Fire. Catch people to stop them from falling on the ground. Chef. Stop the food from falling on the floor. Lifeboat. Stop people from falling into the water. Tropical fish. Catch fish in your fishbowl to keep them from falling in the floor. Manhole. Block the manholes so the people don't fall into the sewers. Do you see where I'm getting at this? I know that these respective games were made back in the early 1980s, but come on! Even the modern versions of these games have little development compared to NES games. They're not as bad as the classic versions, because they admittedly have Mario characters, music, better graphics, and different game mechanics, but even still, this is just bland. In my mind, the worst game of the bunch is Mario Cement Factory. Despite the awesome music in the modern version, you have to wait around for Cookie Dough to pull the lever, making them fall into the next tank. Sometimes it takes a whole minute between servings, making the game even more patience-trying than the rest of the games. And the games also leave me with a confused look on my face. How are the people crammed inside the ambulance like that? Why do the manhole people look so cranky that you'll want to drop them? How weird must you be to just hang around next to a tree all year long without even getting up to get something to eat? Why does Mario throw the key where you reach it instead of keeping it with him where you can't get it? How can someone be stupid enough to run back to the base with their bomb after it was lit by the enemy? And how the heck did I fall down the elevator shaft when there are elevator platforms clearly below me?
What do you know? Haven't you heard of
Silence!
Now, it admittedly has some good games like Boxing, Chef, only the modern version, Fire Attack and Donkey Kong Jr., but I hate the bad games more than I like the good games. Now, I'll admit I haven't unlocked the last 5 games, Bomb Sweeper, Climber, Safe Buster, Lifeboat, and this Game & Watch version of Zelda, and they do sound promising, but Mario's Bombs Away sounded promising too, and aside from colored graphics, nothing impressed me about it. And before I even got enough stars to unlock them, I already got bored with the game. You need to collect every star in the game to beat the game, but some stars can only be accessed by use of multiplayer. How is that bad? Not a lot of people own this game, so it's hard to find someone to link up with. I can't really blame them for not playing this garbage, but it's very hard to find someone who will let you get the stars. Overall, this game, or should I say collection of games, is a huge waste of time. When I was a kid, I was excited to see the Mario characters, but I eventually realized how awful this game is. Most of the time, I enjoyed the mini-movies much more than I enjoyed the games themselves. There's only one more question I have left. What could possibly be worse? Let's recap the other 9 games that I hate before we get to the number 1 game that I find to be the worst. Number 10, Skyward Sword. Number 9, Mega Man 9. Number 8, good movie, horrible game. Number 7, Diddy Kong Racing DS. Number 6, F-Zero Maximum Velocity. Number 5, frustration at its finest. Number 4, worst jump to 3D ever. Number 3, Kingdom Hearts Recoded. And number 2, collection of rubbish. The number 1 entry is a game so awful that I regret the day that I even thought about getting this game. I even wish that I had never breathed on it. My number 1 least favorite game ever is Final Fantasy III for the DS. Where do I even begin with this abomination? Like I said, this is the worst game I played in 2012, and I still stand by that. This game has some of the worst gameplay in any game I've ever played. They made Phoenix Downs unavailable in stores. Now you'll run out of them much more quickly, and you're stuck with the life spell, which costs magic. And they took all of the magic restoring items out of the game, so you'll have a lot of dead characters in your party. Why? This is one of the biggest examples of fake difficulty ever. You have to change classes all the time, which temporarily reduces your stats. Is there anything good about the game? Well, aside from only a few good songs out of its mostly annoying soundtrack, there is nothing good about this game. Well, not that I can think of. I hate this game so much that even seeing footage of it makes my blood boil. It's the only game I've ever played that I felt I was going to get sick from playing because of how much I hated it. I literally rage quit from this game, not because of the difficulty, but because I was having no good times with the game. Like I said in the beginning of the video, if you happen to like this game, I can respect that. But no matter what you say, this is in my mind the worst game I have ever played.
I fell for hours